Well, good morning, everybody. The story we've had going for quite some time now is just going to be about the speed and the strength and how extended the jet stream is across the northern hemisphere. So I thought I'd start you off in the Atlantic. This is pretty interesting. We're going to have wind speeds here today that are going to be approaching 200 miles an hour that are out over the North Atlantic. And I was just curious what this was doing to some flights this morning. So I went to FlightAware and was just kind of getting an idea about any early morning cross or transatlantic flights. And I don't know, let's just pick one right in through here. This one was leaving Atlanta, it looks like, and heading to France. And I was just curious, as we look at that particular flight, which of course would be in those jet stream level winds, what its speed is. So take a look. Its planned speed was 545 miles an hour. Its actual speed is 725. So yeah, they're taking advantage of some of these strong winds going across the open Atlantic today. So I imagine arrival times are going to be changing as we speak. Okay, the other side of this, if we just go to the Pacific, is kind of the similar story. Look at this. We have this extended piece of the jet stream here, and it's the one that's going to be targeting the west for a while. And we're going to get systems rolling across the country with this. But as we talked about, you'll see the newest precipitation map updates. Most of this weather, most of this heavy precipitation is going to be focused in the western United States. Okay, so what did we get over the last 24 hours? Well, through 5 a.m. this morning, we had a little bit of lake effect here. We had this system leave. Most of the country was dry. High pressure dominated very cold air across much of the country. And this was just the beginning of the moisture that was coming into the Pacific Northwest. If you look out over the next 10 days, you can just see where the nose of that jet just continues to attack the west coast here. So our wettest conditions are going to be confined to this area. We will get systems that'll roll across the northern tier of the United States, and there's a chance for some snow coming into Colorado with some cold air, but that's going to be out into next week. What will be important to watch for next week is if we get change in this area. And I want to give you a case as to why we could start to see the activity beginning to increase here about 8, 9, 10 days from now, okay? To do that, we got to look at these upper level winds. So these are the two pieces we just talked about. There's the Atlantic and here's the Pacific. And I've made a bigger deal about the Pacific because that Atlantic flow is, of course, it's leaving. It's out of open ocean. It's not allowing for substantial weather systems to develop along the East Coast because of its position being offshore right now. So what we'll watch is through the end of this week into Saturday and Sunday. This is when we have the strongest of those winds pushing into the west. This will be Saturday night getting into Sunday morning. What we'll keep an eye on, again, just remember, when you disturb the air this much and get it flowing this fast, you can still develop low pressure systems, and we will do that. There's going to be a couple of them, a weekend one and the one midweek next week rolling across the country, in addition to the heavy precip that'll be coming into the west. But overall, like we talked about, this really lacks the amplitude needed to make a big, deep, slow-moving low pressure system as we work our way through the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. Now, what we mentioned is once we get out there past the 10th, our narrative has kind of been the Pacific jet retracts a bit. See, we don't have those kind of continuous strong flow all the way to the west coast, but there's this indication of much better subtropical jet stream flow coming across the country. And what I'll be watching for in week 2 is how this is starting to increase the risk for above normal precipitation across an area that has been quite dry. So that's still our main setup as we go forward. And just playing this out there to the 11th and 12th and 13th, it's going to be the interaction across the eastern half of the United States with the subtropical component of the jet versus the polar part, which is expected to retract back over toward Japan, okay, right into there. So let's kind of get an idea on this. First of all, I want to show you precipitable water. So this is basically, like it sounds like, how much water is in the atmosphere that could be precipitated out. It's a columnar, integral. So we're adding up from the surface all the way to the top of the atmosphere, how much water's in it. So you can see this is almost behaving as though it's an atmospheric river event hitting, the west coast here in the near term. But much of the rest of the country is dry. Even this system that tries to come out over the weekend, look, it's not making a deep pull on the really, really moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll keep an eye on Friday primarily with the push of moisture coming into the Pacific Northwest. Look at that by Saturday. And then as we go forward into your weekend, there's the system I was talking about. So just notice, it's not like it is at other times of the year or like the previous system, which just drew a tremendous amount of moisture into the north. There's a low, but it's going to be starved for moisture. Meanwhile, the West Coast continues to see stronger flow. By Monday, it's pushing down into California. We'll take a look at those precip totals in a second. We see by next Wednesday, there is the chance of getting a better kind of take on this moisture as one last kind of low pulls across the country with this more zonal flow. But again, some of these values can get much deeper when we really pull a lot of moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico, and this isn't really doing it. Plus, it's moving fast, so it doesn't sit there for a while. But by the time we get into next Thursday and Friday, and then out there, this is the 10th and the 11th, there are just some better indicators that the subtropical jet's going to open this up a bit more and therefore pull in better moisture into the south, southeast, mid-south parts of the Ohio basin. We'll have a look at that in just a few seconds here. Okay, so total accumulated precip from the WPC this morning. You notice we have two systems. There's going to be one this weekend and then a second one early next week that's going to roll through the midsection of the country. But these precipitation amounts are not heavy. Our snow will be pretty far to the north given the more mild air that's going to be coming in. Speaking of that mild air, this is not a big snowmaker for the Cascades, all right? Even though you see such heavy precipitation for the west, well, really from northern California through Washington and Oregon, where some places will, by the end of this, pick up 6 inches of rain or more. This is not going to be enough in terms of cold temperatures to really produce a big snowfall event. Some of this does spill over to the Columbia Basin, central and eastern Oregon, heavy rains and better chances for snow in the northern Rockies here, but no major lows blowing up in Montana to return that flow out of the east to give us upslope here. We will be talking a bit about some snow down into parts of Colorado out of this pattern, but that's really going to be something next week to be having a discussion about. So there it is. That's your next 7 days from the latest update from the WPC. And there it is. There's the 12Z. It just came in. You can see not an overall change in the map. I just did an update here with the new 12Z data. So let's go have a look at it. This is the comparison between the GFS and the European. Got everything kind of squared away here. I'm going to pick this up on Saturday when we're kind of keeping an eye on, well, let's go back real quick. Sorry. Thursday into Friday. Just take a look at the Pacific Northwest. We just have this major push of moisture coming in, but the blues are telling you that the snows are going to be primarily into Canada with this. There's a lot of mild air initially with this. As we play through Thursday into Friday, here we go. We play into the weekend now. That's round 2. Very heavy coming in here on Friday night or early Saturday morning. Now it's going to be that wave that possibly gives us a system that gets out in the Canadian prairie on Sunday. Both models picking up on snow right in through here. We'll take a look at the snowfall totals in a second. And then that's going to sneak right along the northern tier of the United States. It is pretty well resolved in both models. This is early Monday morning. By the way, this weekend is the end of daylight saving time. So you notice that my model switched from showing you every 6 hours, like 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. Now they're going back to 6 a.m. because I do all these in Central Time. So anyways, this is early Monday morning, and we're going to watch that pull right across the north into the U.S. over the Great Lakes into Tuesday morning and head on into parts of New England. But again, you just saw the trajectory of that system stays pretty far to the north because right in through here is where the strength of the jet's going to be. So it's going to ride the northern side of it. By Tuesday, we still have a lot of disorganized but precipitation throughout the Pacific Northwest. And then we're going to get past Tuesday into Wednesday. And you're going to notice that the models are trying to kick off another low here next Wednesday into Wednesday night. And that's the one that's got better high pressure on the back side of it. We're trying to kick off some upslope flow into parts of Colorado. That's next Thursday, all right? It's all going to be on the position and strength of that high so you can get the flow coming around it to give us that upslope flow and get some snow here. But overall, you noticed the systems that are coming through don't have, long dangling, slow-moving fronts. They're not deep-cut lows that become so mature that they kind of wrap up and occlude. They're moving quickly across the country, which is why the precipitation numbers are what they are. I do want to show you the snow side of this just to get an idea. We've already looked at the total accumulated precip, but let's look at the snow side of it. That's through Sunday, getting into Monday. Again, Canadian prairie, northern tier of the U.S., right through parts of Ontario into Quebec. You can see better snows in the Rockies and the Cascades out of this by next Tuesday. And remember, the models are attempting to drop a pretty big high-pressure cell into here by next Thursday, giving us some flow that comes around like this. Upslope gives us a little bit of snow in Colorado. That takes you out 198 hours in the ECMWF. Here's 168 hours. That's a week in the in the GFS. So let's go ahead and take it out there to 198. And you can see overall a relatively similar outlook. just a little bit different forecast for snowfall across the northern tier of the U.S. and Colorado when you compare the GFS to the European model. Okay, when we look on the dry side of this is the chance of getting less than half of an inch. So we're just looking here and seeing continued dryness in the southeast. The southwest is yet to really get the experience of the subtropical jet to bring in better moisture. We're waiting. It's going to be a long wait for the Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, and even parts of the Four Corner states here. But as you can imagine, the wetter side of this is going to really primarily be, here into parts around the Great Lakes, Ontario, Quebec, interior of New England. We could get some more lake effect out of this. This is new, though. This is a bit of an increase out there past day 8, 9, 10, pulling in the moisture, but it's the northwest that just gets hammered. There's your chances for 2 inches. I mean, it's just solid red. And there's your chances for 4 inches. And there'll be a few spots in here that could possibly pick up over 8 inches of liquid out of this. So it's pretty impressive precipitation totals. Now, the reality of it is, if I come back to who gets less than half of an inch, the southeast has really got me concerned, in addition to the southwest. This is always a concern, trying to get moisture back into the southwest with this pattern. But I was looking over the last 30 days and just continued to notice the deficits that are running from Louisiana, right through this corridor here over the Appalachian Mountains into the Carolinas, Virginia, Maryland, parts of the mid-Atlantic. This just continues to be an area that has settled into a little bit of fall drought. And we'll see a new drought monitor in about an hour and a half from when I'm recording this. And I'll be curious to see how much this increased. But we are hopeful that with the development of this El Niño and its influence on some of the subseasonal factors, that we're going to start to bring in better moisture into the southwest. I mean, there is hope in this pattern for this to occur if that southwest flow develops in the subtropical jet. All right, what about week 2? I keep mentioning that there's better chances in week 2, and you've now seen the CPC change their tune. The European model and the GFS actually have a similar look, but you look out there and that week 2 forecast is just starting to give us better indications of moisture returning into this area. So I just want to keep an eye on that as we kind of progress forward. All right, temperatures this morning still very cold in parts of the south and southeast, but as we've mentioned, this whole pattern is beginning to make its shift. So at 5:30 this morning, we were just kind of buried in high pressure and some very cold conditions here. That's where we have our freeze warnings still in place. There's some fog issues and winter storm or winter weather advisories in the northern Rockies, but a lot of fog in the Pacific Northwest. But take a look at what the temperatures are expected to do. So here's today's highs. Look at that downslope flow warming things up into the central plains coming off the Rockies. That warmer air spreads east by Friday into Saturday. Saturdays, we've got quite a bit of mild air across the country, save where we've got our snowpack here in Montana and North Dakota, northern Minnesota. So that's Saturday's temperatures getting into Sunday, even a warmer day. So that's great, just to see a nice warm up over the weekend. But remember, there's that system next Monday, Tuesday, that sneaks through and grabs some more colder air to wrap around the backside. So we saw temperatures here in the forecast models drop off, 5 to 10 degrees cooler than average behind that low next Tuesday. But overall, with this pattern, I think we can just go back and say, show me the models on the Ensemble forecast of temperatures. And we keep seeing the evolution of this through day 5 to 10. Keep a little bit more mild air to the south, a little bit more mild throughout the Canadian prairie. And where there's cooler air, it's primarily over Ontario and Quebec, a little bit into New England. This isn't a really highly anomalous pattern as we work our way out there toward the middle of the month. We just kind of see it roll over and over, week on, week off, as we've been discussing. From here, I'm going to show you the newest update from the European model, looking out to the 10th of December. So this is November 10 to December 10. November 10 to December 10. And there is something I'm watching carefully. Notice more of California is expected to be wetter. The whole of the south, southeast, and even parts of the mid-south and midwest are expected to be wetter. And we've seen the model advertise this. I'm going to diagnose this pattern and what's going to cause this in tomorrow's long-range forecast. But I wanted you to see it today so we can watch the evolution of this together. But a lot of my discussion is going to be about the MJO progression. We continue to see subsidence, sinking motion here, 4-5, phase 4-5. But this kind of progression east of rising motion out of the Pacific toward, Central America, South America, I think this is a bit of a catalyst for some change in the pattern, and this may promote better subtropical flow as we get out there into the end of November. Okay, so that's something we've been discussing. Subtropical flow, again, that's like from Hawaii into the western United States. Thinking about that, I just also have to be watching if we do start to bring in better rising motion into this area. Will we start to bring an end to some of the drought building problems we've had in Brazil? Because for the next 10 days, this is going to be our driest strip right in through here. So that includes Goiás, Sao Paulo, parts of Minas Gerais. I think that's how you say it. I never know if I'm screwing that up. But southern Mato Grosso and then Mato Grosso do Sul. We've seen better rains moving in the forecast models into eastern Brazil, and you look a little bit farther north, and yes, we have pockets of drier weather, but not as dry as a bit farther to the south. This flooding problem here just seems to be, I've been talking about this since September. That's how long we've been watching the flooding rains here. And that's mostly going to be bringing that rain into parts of Santa Catarina, out of Paraná, Paraguay, the Paraná River, which is right in through here, and then down into Uruguay now. Now, this could bring better rains into Santa Fe, maybe over toward Buenos Aires, but we saw the models back off over here in Cordoba with total precipitation. This continues to be a very dry spot. And I want to spend my last few slides telling you a bit about South America here, because the newest outlook for November 10 to December 10 has kept things very dry farther to the north and extremely wet to the south. There's a lot of persistence in this new European model forecast. And if you look at it, we're talking about 40 to some places approaching 100 millimeters of additional rainfall over a month down here. So that's like 4 to 5 inches of extra rainfall when you look at these colors right here in southern Brazil. Now, the deficits to the north are up here in this 40 to 60 millimeter range, maybe a little bit more in places. So we're looking at, that's 2 inches of below normal precipitation, which is, if this verifies, is the wrong signal. But I want to talk to you about this particular time period because November through February rains are the most critical for the soybean crop that's going in right now. Now, we've studied this, and I've shown you this over the years, but I know I have a lot of new viewers, so I just want to bring this back up. We've done research over the last 5 years studying the evolution of October precipitation. This was primarily inspired by a paper that was written here. Here's the link to it in Nature that looked at a vapor pressure deficit as we come out of August and September into October, and it seems to be growing the vapor pressure deficit. That's a deficit of moisture in and around north central Brazil. So just using some reanalysis data, we also found that since 1970, we're about 80 millimeters drier over the last 50 years in October, suggesting that we're kind of compressing those planting windows. So I want to show you what November is. So same data source. We're just going to use here the ECMWF, what's called ERA 5 data set. It's the best that there is in terms of reanalysis. And over that same area, so again, I'm looking, right here in this bounding box, November precipitation doesn't hold the same kind of strength of downward trend. There is a small, very weak negative trend in this data set as you work your way over the last 50 years, so from 1970 to present, but it is not that as strong as it is in October. And thinking about that, November getting into December, January, February, in fact, let's flip this over to December, January, February. I wanted to look at the precipitation totals during that time for that same box in Brazil. Now, what's average? Average is about 0.7 meters or 700 millimeters of rainfall. That's a lot of rainfall. We're talking about, gosh, I can't do this in the top of my head. So what's 700 millimeters to inches? I should be able to do this. 27 inches of rainfall. That's what we're talking about here when you see these data being averaged. So 27 inches over December, January, February. But I was interested in this. We have some dryness problems early, right? What made these dry years here? What does it take? And I want to make a very strong point to all of you about this. You're going to hear a lot of people over-attributing El Niño to precipitation patterns in Brazil, specifically Brazil, throughout the whole season. I've studied this for a long time. Just between you and me, okay, I really wish El Niño had a much more dominant influence on Brazil weather, where it was just black and white. Oh, El Niño, you get this. La Niña, you get that. not in the tropics. That's just not how it works right here in this part of Brazil. So I've been talking over a map that really tells you the true thing to be watching. If you want to know why I harp all the time on the MJO, it's because if that MJO lives somewhere in this area, okay, if it lives in phase 4 or 5 or 6, really 4, 5, 6, you just suppress the monsoon. If it pops out to phase 8 way over here or lives in phase 1 over there, these folks are getting plenty of moisture in December, January, February. But to be honest, if the MJO continues to live here, then we're in trouble. So let me show you what I mean. If the MJO sits in phase 4 and 5 and 6, we build high pressure into this area. And now high pressure centers, remember, in the southern hemisphere spin like this. Now we can't have a high pressure cell here and expect to have moisture. It's got to be over there. That's where the high pressure needs to be in order for Brazil to have a great monsoon. Why? Just take the H, move it over here, and get the flow to do this. That's what you need. That pulls in the tropical moisture, goes over the Amazon, and just dumps the rain here. You put a high pressure cell in the middle there, the flow does this. See it? Your anomalous flow goes around the high like that. So you get flooding south, but you're drawing on subtropical air from this area into Brazil, not moist air from the tropics here. So if the MJO lives north of Australia, over Indonesia, we have problems with building high pressure in this area. So we just have to be careful thinking about this, because most people want to tell you, oh, it's just El Nino. Everything's El Nino. My goodness. El Nino is a background thing. It's like the undercurrent of the river. What sucks you in are all the little eddies, all the little things, the little features. So I just want to show you one thing. You take Brazil's total precipitation from December, January, February for that bounding box. This is the one we talked about right here. That's the spot I'm looking at. If you take a look at the total precipitation from December, January, February, and do a scatter plot against December, January, February INSO index, which means that's my y-axis. This would be El Nino. This would be La Nina. You get a correlation coefficient of 0.2. There's people out there that are going to tell you that it's like 0.9. It isn't. You go talk to Brazilians, their own researchers will tell you, they're atmospheric scientists, which are extremely brilliant people. They're telling us folks down there, don't look at the El Nino. El Nino's in the background. Talk about the MJO. Talk about the Atlantic Meridional. Talk about where high pressure is building. And I'm leaving this scatter plot up for a while so that you understand it's a shotgun blast. If it was 0.9, oh man, I mean, you'd see a line just run straight across here and all the dots sit on it. And I'd go, yep, El Nino, big time rains, or La Nina, no rain, or something like that. But it's not. It's not that way. So I'm sorry I had to harp on that this morning. I just want to let you know that the controls of the Brazilian weather in the upcoming 4 months will be dictated by things happening on the other side of the planet with the MJO. That is the primary driver. So let's keep thinking about it, and we'll just talk about it and watch the evolution of those things over the next few weeks and months, and we'll keep you updated. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.